What the hell happened at the Argentina-Egypt World Cup match? With 11 minutes left on the clock in Atlanta, Lionel Messi's World Cup was over. Not in danger. Not hanging by a thread. Over Argentina, the reigning world champions, the team that lifted the trophy in Qatar just 4 years ago, were 2 goals down to Egypt, a country that before this tournament had never won a single knockout match in its entire history. Messi had already missed a penalty. He'd been dispossessed, outmuscled, outrun. He looked every single day of his 39 years. And the man who has spent 2 decades rewriting what football even means was about to walk off a World Cup pitch as a beaten man exactly 24 hours after Cristiano Ronaldo had done the same thing. The symmetry was almost too cruel to be real. And then in the space of 13 minutes, everything you thought you knew about this tournament caught fire. Argentina scored 3 times. 3. They came from 2 goals down later in a match than any team in World Cup history has ever managed. Messi cried on the pitch. Egypt's players collapsed onto the grass like their bones had been removed. Their coach walked up to Messi at full time and made FIFA's official anti-racism gesture directly in his face. One of his own staff members had to be physically restrained by security after charging at the Argentine captain, and was shown a red card and marched off the pitch. There was a disallowed goal, a saved penalty, a phantom foul, a screaming touchline confrontation, an accusation of a FIFA conspiracy, and one of the greatest comebacks the sport has ever produced. So let's actually get into it. Because this wasn't a football match. This was a war. And you cannot understand a single frame of what happened in Atlanta without first understanding who Egypt were before that night. This is a country utterly obsessed with football that had until this tournament played 7 matches across 3 World Cup appearances and won exactly 0 of them. 0. They famously tried to enter the very first World Cup back in 1930 and missed the boat to Uruguay. Literally missed the boat. Their coach, Hossam Hassan, a legend in Cairo, had said before the tournament that Egypt needed to show up in a completely different way this time. And they did. They beat New Zealand for their first ever World Cup win. Then, they knocked out Australia on penalties. And then, they walked into Atlanta Stadium to face the world champions with absolutely nothing to lose. And they played like it. Free, fearless, snapping into tackles like their lives depended on it. Refusing to be intimidated by the shirt or the man wearing number 10. Within 15 minutes, they were ahead. A corner floated in by Marwan Attia and Yasser Ibrahim absolutely bullet-headed it past Emiliano Martinez before wheeling away half in disbelief while the Egyptian bench detonated. And Argentina, a team that had not trailed at halftime of a World Cup match since the 4-0 humiliation Germany handed them in 2010, suddenly had no idea what was happening to them. 6 minutes later came the moment that should have fixed everything and instead broke Messi in half. Hicham Hassan hauled down Nicolas Tagliafico in the box. French referee François Letexier didn't hesitate. Penalty, and here it was. The great man. The redemption arc writing itself. Except Messi struck it poorly, and Egypt's goalkeeper Mustafa Chobert threw himself to his left and clawed it away. Which made Messi the first player in the history of the World Cup to miss 2 penalties in the same tournament. Read that sentence again. In a career of records nobody thought a human could reach, that is the one he never wanted his name attached to. And then, Chobert simply refused to let anything else pass him. He stopped Alexis Mac Allister point blank. He watched Messi's curling free kick smack the outside of the post. He somehow kept out Julian Alvarez from close range after Tagliafico picked him out, leaving Alvarez standing there absolutely gobsmacked, hands on his head staring at the sky. And the backstory here is delicious. Chobert's father Ahmed was Egypt's goalkeeper at the 1990 World Cup. And his time wasting against Ireland was so shameless it actually helped bring about the backpass rule being written into the laws of the game. Now his son was single-handedly holding off the world champions on the biggest stage there is. This wasn't a fluke performance. This was a family finishing a story that had started 35 years ago. Argentina walked in at halftime losing, rattled, and completely out of ideas. And then the second half took this game somewhere it had absolutely no business going. Early in the second period, Egypt broke on the counter. Hassan tore down the left. Mohamed Salah slid an inch-perfect ball through the middle. And Zizou, a striker literally named after the Brazilian legend, finished it clean past Martinez. 2-0. Egypt were in the quarterfinals. Egypt were making history. Except the VAR started rewinding the tape. and rewinding, and rewinding. Roughly 30 seconds of playing time earlier, Atia had given Lisandro Martinez the lightest tug of the shirt in the build-up and clipped his toe. That's it. That is the foul. That is what got the goal wiped off the board. And let's be blunt about why Egypt lost their minds over this. Because they have a genuine argument here, and it deserves to be heard. This is the World Cup where FIFA's head of referees Pierluigi Collina explicitly instructed officials to let normal football contact go and keep the tempo of matches up. And it worked. Fouls are down to 22.6 per game from 25 in 2022 and 27 in 2018. So the tournament's entire refereeing philosophy has been let it flow. Don't be soft. Don't stop the game for a shirt tug. And then a VAR rewinds half a minute of play to disallow a brilliant goal for a shirt tug and a stepped-on toe. Yes, technically it's reviewable because the challenge falls inside the attacking phase. But is it consistent? Remember Alexander Pavlovic's boot raised into the face of Ecuador's Pedro Vite? No VAR intervention. Leroy Sané's goal stood. If you let those go on the field, you cannot then go digging for microscopic fouls on a monitor half a minute back. Egypt didn't get a bad decision. Egypt got a decision made by a completely different rulebook to the one every other team had been playing under all tournament long. And here's the twist that makes it worse. It didn't even matter. Because 8 minutes later, Egypt scored anyway. Hassan left Nahuel Molina absolutely for dead down the left, cut it back, and Zizou buried it past Martinez. 2-0 for real this time. No rewind, no reprieve. Atlanta Stadium was in complete shock. The world champions were staring straight down the barrel. Egypt were 11 minutes away from the greatest result in their entire footballing history from a first quarter final for a country that had waited nearly a century for one. And Messi, who had done absolutely nothing all night, was 11 minutes from an ending nobody on earth wanted to watch. Then, he came alive. And there is an actual reason why, which is worth understanding rather than just calling it magic. Lionel Scaloni brought on Lautaro Martinez for Rodrigo de Paul, and it shunted Messi out toward the right wing. In the middle, he'd been suffocated, swarmed, 3 Egyptian shirts on him every single time he touched the ball. Out wide, he found air. He found space. He found the game again. In the 79th minute, he floated across from that right side and Christian Romero rose above everyone to head it past Chaubert. 2-1. Game on. Moments later, Messi was off on a mazy, absurd run through bodies, the kind of run he genuinely hasn't been able to make for years, nearly setting up Lautaro. And then in the 83rd minute, Egypt failed to clear their lines. The ball dropped to Messi just inside the box, and there was only ever going to be one outcome. Half volley. Perfect technique under maximum pressure with the World Cup on the line. Chaubert got 2 hands to it and couldn't stop it. Ball flying into the roof of the net, 2 apiece. That goal was his 21st in World Cup history, extending his own record. 8 at this tournament alone, 1 clear of Kylian Mbappe and Erling Haaland in the Golden Boot race. He also became the first player ever to score in 6 consecutive World Cup knockout matches. And he did it in the exact same match where he became the first man to miss 2 penalties in a single tournament. That is the most Messi thing imaginable. The worst record in the sport and the greatest, side by side in the same 90 minutes. But Argentina were not finished. And this is where the whole thing exploded. 2 minutes into stoppage time, Egypt attacked one last time. Salah went down in the Argentina box, screaming for a foul, claiming Julian Alvarez had tripped him. The whistle stayed silent. No VAR check. Argentina broke immediately on the counter. Lautaro Martinez swung in a cross, and Enzo Fernandez rose to head it home. The winner. 3-2. And the cruelest twist of all. It was Salah, the other number 10. The man this game had been built around, who lost possession in the very move that killed his own country's dream. Egypt were incandescent. Their players slumped to the turf like they'd been shot. Their coach insisted afterward that a shirt had been pulled in that box. Some reports named Salah, others named Hamdi Fathi, and that the VAR didn't even bother to look at it. And the officiating logic behind that non-decision is worth explaining, because it is the exact mirror image of the disallowed goal. And it is what turned Egyptian frustration into something closer to pure fury. Because Salah went down inside the box, the VAR wasn't assessing a foul. It was assessing a penalty. And a penalty carries a higher threshold. Not enough contact for a spot kick means no review. Goal stands. Had Salah been standing 1 yard outside the area, that identical contact would have had to be checked for consistency. 1 yard. That is the entire margin between Egypt getting a free kick and a lifeline and Egypt getting eliminated on the counterattack. 2 nearly identical fouls, 30 minutes apart, and the rulebook produced opposite verdicts on both. You can defend each decision on its own. Try defending them together. And at the final whistle, this match completely lost its mind. Messi walked toward the Egypt bench and exchanged words with Hossam Hassan. Nobody knows what was said. No audio has ever come out. But Hassan's response was extraordinary. He crossed his arms into an X. FIFA's official anti-racism gesture. The one introduced in 2024 to report racist abuse and trigger the discrimination protocol. He did it in Messi's face. It got him booked. And then several Egyptian staff members came flooding toward the confrontation, and one of them absolutely lost it, charging at Messi with genuine aggression before Argentine players surrounded their captain, and security and officials wrestled the situation apart. The staff member was shown a red card and escorted away. That is the most decorated footballer in the history of the sport being physically charged at by an opposing coach's staff, on the pitch, at a World Cup, seconds after one of the great comebacks. Neither FIFA nor the Egyptian Federation has clarified who Hassan's gesture was actually aimed at, or what specifically triggered it. Hassan himself never mentioned it afterward. What he did do was point the finger straight at the top. In an explosive interview, he said his team had been treated unfairly and had suffered injustice. Then he went further. He said out loud what a lot of Egyptian fans were already screaming. Perhaps they wanted Messi to stay in the running. He said Argentina had received support at every level, questioned the credibility of the whole thing, and asked the question that will be replaying in Cairo for the next decade. Why is there no fairness in sports? Zizou backed him, calling the injustice clear from the very start of the match. That is a hell of an accusation to level at a World Cup. And FIFA, asked to comment, said nothing. So let's take it seriously for a moment, because this is where I have to be fair to Argentina. And there's a version of this story where they are simply nothing but the victims of a hostile narrative. Nobody handed them that comeback. There is no conspiracy that makes Christian Romero win a header or Enzo Fernandez attack a cross in the 92nd minute with the nation on his back. The disallowed goal, by the letter of the law, was a foul in the build-up. Inconsistent with the tournament, yes, but not invented. The Salah incident, by the higher penalty threshold, genuinely wasn't a spot kick, and Messi's equalizer was a piece of technique that no referee gave him. Roy Keane, who does not hand out compliments, called Argentina street fighters, said they would not give up. And he was right. Enzo Fernandez put it simply, this is a group that never gives up. 4 years on from Qatar and hungry to do it again. Scaloni was so overwhelmed on the touchline he couldn't even finish his post-match interview. That is not a team being carried by officials. That is a team refusing to die. But here is the truth that makes this match so complicated and why it will be argued about for the next 10 years. Both things are true at once. Argentina were heroic, and Egypt were wronged by an inconsistency that had nothing to do with conspiracy and everything to do with a VAR system that applies completely different standards to identical contact, depending on which side of a white line it happens on. Egypt didn't lose because FIFA wanted Messi. Egypt lost because they couldn't hold a 2-goal lead for 11 minutes against the world champions, and because the rulebook flipped on them twice in the same night. Those are two separate wounds. They both hurt. And underneath all of it, the story of the night is a 39-year-old man who was finished, who had been publicly humiliated by a penalty save, who was being knocked off the ball by younger, stronger men, and who found something anyway. Messi was thrown into the air by his teammates at full time. They mercifully managed not to drop him. And he was crying. Ronaldo's tears the night before ended his World Cup forever. Messi's kept his alive. Argentina are into the quarterfinals in Kansas City, chasing something no team has done since 1958 and 1962. Back-to-back World Cups. And Egypt fly home with the best performance in their entire footballing history. The greatest goalkeeping display of the tournament, and a burning sense that the game itself was against them. 11 minutes. That is all that stood between the greatest shock of this World Cup and the greatest comeback in its history. Football gave us the comeback. Egypt will spend a very long time wondering why. So where does this rank for you? Greatest comeback ever or straight up robbery? I genuinely cannot decide. So settle it for me in the comments below and stick around for the quarterfinals. Because if this is what the round of 16 looked like, we have absolutely no idea what's coming next.